I recently went plein air painting in a stunning park and painted this beautiful painting using the brightest colors that I have. I wanted to use a limited palette, and in this video I'm not only going to talk through my painting process, but I'm also going to share some beautiful videos of the stunning park that I was in, with the hopes that if I want to pause and paint them again I can, but also that you can do the same. So if you're looking for references of beautiful parks, then feel free to paint any from here. After all that walking around, I finally found the perfect place. Somewhere that looked beautiful but was under shade and also had a seat and was nice and private. In terms of the art supplies that I took with me, I had a sea white watercolor sketchbook. I had one travel brush in the size 12. I also carried my Stay Wet palette, which you know I love, and my gouache, and a jar of water to clean my brush, as well as a jar of water to spritz my paints. This is by all means completely extra. And then I also had my own makeshift palette that I created so that I have somewhere to blend. I go into this in way more detail in my video about how to travel with art supplies, because by the nature of it, this almost feels like traveling with it, even though it's a short trip to Surrey. The color palette that I'll be using is a lemon or primary yellow, whichever one you have to hand, the cobalt turquoise light, quinacridone magenta, Winsor dioxazine violet, and white. The reason that I say lemon or primary yellow is because to me they're quite similar, and it just so happened that I had run out of my primary yellow, thus I used lemon. This entire color palette was inspired by an art challenge that I created for my Ko-fi members this month. Ko-fi is an alternative to Patreon, and on there I am able to create art challenges, to create exclusive videos, to chat on Discord, and so much more. It is growing into a wonderful community of artists of all skill levels. And as well as access to all the rewards I create, it also helps out the channel. So if you're interested in joining, then definitely check out those links. I just wanted to illustrate some of the main mixes that I created in this piece and also in the piece that I showed you for my Ko-fi members. Essentially, to mix like really bright punchy greens, I was mixing the lemon yellow with the turquoise. To mute it down or make it a bit more olive green, a little bit more dull, I would add the magenta to it and get this color. For some of the barks or the darkest areas in the trees, I would add hints of purple, like the lightest bit, and then as you can see, I could get a range of these different colors. By all means pause this if you need to, but just to illustrate the bottom row, the top two colors are the colors that I mixed together, and then I added yellow to get the color to the right, and then I added some more purple to get the color further right, and then I added some more yellow again to get that color. So you can see it just took a lot of experimentation and playing around with colors, but I find it fascinating that I can start with such a bright, I guess, color scheme and then end up creating such varying ranges of darker and moodier colors. And that's what I really wanted to experiment with when I was out in the park. At points I was in two minds, and I just did kind of think to myself, let me just use the, convenience colors that I already have, or the colors that I already know how to mix. But I am so glad that I stuck to that limited color palette. It was honestly a challenge that I think has helped me evolve in my art, and I'm so excited to try other limited palettes and to evolve with this one as well. In terms of my painting process for gouache, I usually like to start things off by doing a very light initial block layer. What I mean by that is that I use a bit of paint but more water, and then just lay out the main colors that I'm seeing without adding shading, without adding any extra detail, just having the background. In this instance, that's essentially mapping out the sky with a nice light turquoise. I then did some of the lighter greens that are further in the back, and then as I came forward I could see that massive stretch of yellow because it's been such a hot summer, which I was mapping down as well. And as I get closer and I get to the pond, I then start mixing darker versions of green. I start from the things that are furthest away and then come closer and closer and closer. So the sky, and then the trees, and then the closer trees, and then the pond. And it's okay for it to be completely imperfect, because this is almost my way of toning the paper or just getting rid of the white. So I know that I'm going to layer over it with gouache. I know that some bits may peek through, and I actually quite like that. But ultimately, it's a low pressure way of just trying to figure out what goes where, and also I guess as a bit of a warm-up exercise, trying to figure out mixing the different colors, especially as this color palette is something that I am still getting familiar with. Once I've done that, I then like to start adding my darkest areas followed by my lightest areas. And to be perfectly honest, I knew that the darkest areas would be the biggest challenge with the colors that I had picked, so that is what I was focusing on. And the key thing that I kept reminding myself of is to simplify. Try and literally draw or paint the shapes that I am seeing, as opposed to think this is a tree and I need to paint exactly a tree, because then that's when things can start getting overwhelming. Another big challenge with painting on plein air is just the continuous change in what I'm trying to paint. There's change in lighting, the clouds, the sun comes out, the lighting changes again, it gets darker, it gets windy, just the whole thing. And it's definitely an interesting experience, and you can probably see it reflected in the palette changing and the lighting changing throughout this video. But it does force me to work faster and to really appreciate the important things that I want to capture, and that for me was some of the brightest yellows right at the trees at the front, as well as some of the nice shadows in the background. I was really impressed and surprised with some of the colors that I was able to mix, and that made this challenge incredibly fun. So I definitely implore you to try and consider using a limited palette to see what you can create. Gouache does tend to have a drying shift, which basically means that darker colors dry lighter and lighter colors dry darker. So I found that with each subsequent layer, as well as them getting thicker, which means more paint and less water, I was also really focusing on making the colors as dark as possible without just putting straight purple on the paper, as well as also using the white to do little highlights to tie the piece together. I'll go into even more detail in my video that I'm creating exclusively for my Ko-fi members. But before I end this video, I thought that it would be nice to share even more videos that I've taken while on my walk. So if you want to pause and paint it or draw it, then you most definitely can. All I ask is that you tag me if you share it, because I love seeing the art that you create. Or if you just want to relax and watch it, then you most certainly can. If you're still watching, then you are most definitely a real MVP, and I really appreciate you. Let me know that you're still watching by telling me what 4 colors you would include in your limited palette and what you would create with it. Thank you so much, and thank you to all my Ko-fi members. I will see you next week. Bye.